for investors, right? Market volatility might not hurt a lot of investors, right? You can trade the markets, they move up, they move down, even if we slide into recession. But for businesses, how do they plan this? How do they manage around this?
Well, they really can't. You said it at the top of the show. I mean, when you have lead times that can be measured in years rather than days, weeks, or months, it is extraordinarily difficult. The president said he was giving automakers potentially the chance to reshore manufacturing by possibly giving them a break on tariffs. Now, that's going to be really hard because to reestablish an auto industry in the United States that currently relies on parts from Canada, Mexico, and other parts of the world to assemble cars here in the U.S. takes years and billions of dollars in investment. So there is no easy way around this. And I think, as you said, the messaging here is so confusing. Investors can indeed trade around this, and sometimes within hours and days, businesses can't replicate that.
And that's the thing. So, Nick, if you're a consumer planning your life, your summer, your year, or you're a business, where does that leave you right now?
Well, I think you said it right in the opening there. Liberation Day on April 2nd was supposed to be about providing clarity. And I think if you go back you look over the last 2 weeks, we still don't have the clarity. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was interviewed today. He was asked, can you guarantee clarity 90 days from now when the pause on the so-called reciprocal tariffs expired? And he said, clarity is in the eye of the beholder, but I can guarantee you that we're going to run a robust process. So you're right. Businesses are upset that they don't have the clarity that they had hoped to have by now. And, the sentiment is going to get worse here as the market swings around.
All right, let's talk about his approach, Susan, because the president said he's looking for something to help some of the car companies. And last week he said he's making decisions instinctively. Is this not just opening the door for possible blatant, huge, enormous corruption? Because I can tell you, on Saturday morning, as soon as people started to hear about the exemptions that smartphones were getting, that Apple was getting, immediately business leaders that I talk to are figuring out who's their trade rep, what lobbyists are they talking to, and who else in the industry, and do they need to hightail it down to Mar-a-Lago to see what they can get from Mr. President, which I'm sure the president would love.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has invited this singular global focus on himself. He has accrued unbelievable power over the global economy and simply asserted the right of one man to destabilize whole markets, not to mention the business plans that you're talking about. It's an exercise of one man power that I don't think has any modern precedent. And because of the scale of the damage that's being done, it's really a remarkable flex by Trump. But remember that it's also an unbelievably risky political decision stuff. It's essentially Donald Trump has taken all of his chips for the first year of his presidency, which is when presidents historically have a very short window to make a big impact. Other presidents have, worked with Congress to come up with sweeping legislation, something like Obamacare, for example, or the Inflation Reduction Act. Donald Trump, rather than working with Congress, has chosen to take all that political capital and put it in a global trade war, and in particular with a confrontation with China. And I think the confusion is just one aspect of it, but the other aspect of it that's really remarkable is a geopolitical confrontation between the world's two largest economic powers. And this, for better, for worse, is going to define Donald Trump's first year in office. It is the political bet of his first year.
Tyler, yesterday when Howard Lutnick said, those exemptions, we'll see, maybe they'll be back in a month. Within minutes, I had so many people saying to me, Howard Lutnick, is he off message? Is he getting kicked out of the White House? Is there fighting out? And then within 2 hours, Trump basically backs up what Howard Lutnick said, defying the statement the White House put out Friday night. Is there any attempt to unify their message? Whatever it is, people have to plan to go right or left, and the White House is telling us neither.
I mean, Steph, as you said at the start here, what business leaders are looking for is stability, and what the president and his administration are doing is often the opposite of that. I think what's important to keep in mind is that this is done at the whims of Trump. As you mentioned, he said, earlier this month that he was going to decide future tariff policy based on his instinct. And his instinct has changed throughout this process. And so I think it is hard to coordinate message when the policy is driven by one individual who has very clearly changed his position on this core issue throughout the process. And so I think the clarity that business leaders, investors, lawmakers are looking for is really hard to come by, because the president is very easily swayed by the last person he spoke to. We've known this since he became president in 2017 and throughout his first term and into the second term. He is very amenable to conversations with people. And I think that's some of the genesis of these initial exemptions we saw from some of these companies, is that they made their case and he was swayed by it. And so he was open to exemptions. And then he saw the fallout of that and didn't like it anymore. And so changed his mind. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about this wide-ranging policy, is that it is going to be changed based on what Donald Trump is feeling in the moment, and often dictated by news coverage and by the stock market. And we've seen the policy change because of those two things.
Nick, we kept hearing this move is about Main Street. It's here to help Main Street, not Wall Street. But small businesses, we say it over and over, are sort of the heartbeat of America. Big business leaders might be the last people to talk to Donald Trump. They might be able to influence him. But think about small business in America. They have no ability to get to this White House and what it's going to do for them. Take any small business out there, and there's a decent chance China is a supplier.
That's right. And I think if you look at the way that these tariffs are being applied and then the exemptions are being given, it's raising concerns with some small manufacturers in the United States. So finished goods that qualify for an exemption, it may actually be cheaper now to import a finished good from China than if you're importing the components to make that product in the United States if those intermediate goods face a tariff. And so there are a lot of concerns, and you see letters flying to members of Congress saying, well, wait a minute, I make things here in the United States, but if I face a tariff on steel or aluminum or lumber, you heard about pharmaceuticals in your open, and the finished good that's coming from abroad is going to get an exemption, or it's going to get a lower tariff, that's actually going to put the domestic manufacturer at a disadvantage.
Ron, in the Bloomberg interview that Nick was referring to earlier with Scott Bessent, he was asked about the Chinese official who called Trump's tariffs on their country a joke. Here was Bessent's response.
President Trump, Chairman Xi have a very good relationship. And I wouldn't say that these are not a joke. I mean, these are big numbers. I think no one thinks they're sustainable, wants them to remain here, but it's far from a joke.
So Secretary Bessent says no one thinks Trump's tariffs on China are sustainable, except Peter Navarro does, and other members of this administration who think these tariffs are going to bring in billions, if not trillions of dollars.
And that China's going to pay for them, just like Mexico paid for the wall. And President Xi may not think this is a joke either, since he just put export controls on rare minerals and magnets that are used in everything from cars to computers. But I don't think anyone thinks this is a joke. And even though there was a Chinese official who said it that way derisively, I mean, I'm sure it was just to goad the president and to needle him. But no, I don't think there's anyone who thinks in any way, shape, or form this is a joke. We're on the cusp of a major trade war, global trade war. That
could lead to monetary policy devastation. Yeah. Susan, here's one thing I want to break down for a second. I want to look at what Donald Trump will spend money on versus what he won't. He will spend $1 trillion for defense spending, tax cuts that would benefit the rich, $10,000 per Greenlander to annex the island. Now let's look at what he will not spend money on. Medicaid, schools, medical research, and diplomacy. And you could probably throw in he's happy to spend money on crypto as well. He is making his priorities crystal clear to the American people. Is that what they voted for?
They voted for Donald Trump to be the engine of instability in the world. Yes, I think they did, because anyone who came out of the first 4 years of Trump, including but not limited to the spectacular smash up of his final year in office in 2020, and didn't think that he was going to be a disruptive force in the world, well, they were wrong or misinformed. Those specifics, Donald Trump didn't talk about basically any of the things that you just listed, Steph, on the campaign trail, with the exception of crypto. Donald Trump made his new found flip-flop on crypto very evident during the campaign. He surrounded himself with players from the crypto industry who spent millions and millions of dollars to get him elected, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who now is all over the airways confusing us about the trade war. He has delivered for those big donors already in his administration. Just in 85 days, he's made major policy gifts to the crypto industry. So that's just one example. But I think your bigger point is right. We knew that Donald Trump was a tariff man, but when you see this kind of unaccountable power vested in one man and no one in our system who has the power to check him, I'm talking about Republicans in Congress, for example, they have absented themselves from the chat. They're not participating in this. And so we're left with one guy in the White House and a bunch of courtiers surrounding him who are telling us conflicting things at any given moment.